Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar to discuss housing and community design for resilient and equitable communities. We'll get started in just a moment. I just opened the Zoom webinar to allow folks to join, so we'll just take a few moments to allow everyone to join us. A few things to note before we begin the conversation. If you've joined us before, you know the drill, but just so you know, you can see us, but we cannot see you. That being said, you are an important part of today's webinar and conversation. If you are joining as an audience member, we hope that you will participate in the chat to share ideas and resources. And we hope that you will ask any questions that you have for the panelists using the Q&A function. And I will get to as many audience questions as I can today. Since everyone always wants to know if we are recording the conversation, we are recording this conversation today, and we will be sure to send a link to the recording to everyone who has registered for this webinar. We'll get started in just a moment. We're seeing lots of people joining, and that is great. If you want to go ahead and tell us who you are and where you're joining us from, that will give the panelists an idea of who all is in the audience today. And it's always great to see how many people we have from across Arizona and joining us from around the country sometimes as well. So go ahead and let us know who all is joining us and where you're from. We'll get started in just a moment, but if you've joined in the past couple of seconds, just so you know, you can see us, but we can't see you. We want to know who's joining us today. Go ahead and drop your name and where you're from in the chat, and we will get started in just 1 second. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for this Housing and Community Design for Resilient and Equitable Communities webinar. My name is Serena Unrein, and I'm with the Arizona Partnership for Healthy Communities, which is managed by LISC Phoenix. We are so grateful to Arcos Health for their sponsorship of this year's Arizona Partnership for Healthy Communities webinar series. Once a quarter, we bring together practitioners from various sectors to share best practices, data, and policies to help improve community health. This year's series explores topics at the intersection of health, equity, and sustainability through the lens of climate change. Today, we're going to be discussing community design and how good design is more than just aesthetically pleasing. It's crucial in combating the ever-increasing negative effects of climate change on our communities. We have expert panelists from across the state to share how smart, effective design goes far beyond basic infrastructure. We'll be discussing everything from the specific threats that Arizona faces in extreme heat and wildfires, to creating habitable communities, to addressing the unique challenges faced by our rural areas, and the importance of incorporating nature into outdoor spaces for children. So we have wonderful people here to join us today to share their thoughts and insights. We hope that you'll be sharing your thoughts and insights by dropping your ideas and resources into the chat, by asking questions using the Q&A function, and we'll get to as many audience questions as we can throughout the day. We will be recording this webinar and sending out a link to the recording to everyone who registered, and the follow-up email will also include links to any resources that our speakers referenced during today's webinar, so you don't have to worry about copying and pasting everything that happens to pop up into the chat. I'd like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves so you can get to know them a little bit better. I'm going to start with Shay. And when I have each panelist introduce themselves, I'm going to ask them to share their name, where they're from, any helpful background. And also, because we believe there is power in setting context as a group, we'd like to start with our humanity and our connections. So each panelist is going to be sharing what they are feeling gratitude for today. So Shay, I'll go ahead and have you start.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. My name is Sharayah Jimenez. I go by Shay. I'm the owner and principal designer here for Cuadro in Tucson. I have been practicing architecture now for about 15 years. I graduated from the College of Architecture at the University of Arizona, capitalist, the program. And yeah, today I'm really feeling grateful for the rain. There's been some nice rain here in Tucson. But always for me, it's my family. I have a really close relationship with my extended family, elders, grandparents, aunts, uncles, my sister, as well as my immediate family, my partner, and my son. So yeah, thank you all.
Thanks,
Put it on
Shay.
to, yeah.
I'll pass it on to Maggie.
Thanks, Serena. Hello, everyone. My name is Maggie Soffel. I work for Arizona State University's University City Exchange office. We are an external facing office, part of University Affairs that works on urban planning and urban design projects in the community here in the Metro Phoenix area. I'm an urban planner by trade. I've been practicing as a planner for over a decade now with experience in local and regional government specifically until my role here at ASU over the last year. And my planning expertise has really been in climate resilience, mitigation, and adaptation. And what I work on now at ASU is the Rio Reimagined initiative, which I know I'll talk more about here today with all of you, but it is it's a planning initiative that's 6 years or many decades, depending on how you look at it, in the making, looking at a 55-mile river corridor that runs through the heart of the urban Phoenix metro area. And I'm grateful for so many things, but today I'm grateful for this convening, this opportunity for meeting with this community of practitioners where we can come together and learn from each other. So thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Miracle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so happy to be here with all you guys. My name is Miracle Martinez, and I'm the program manager for a 501c3 called Regenerating Sonora, Promotora for the University of Arizona, and a student of the Earthship Biotecture Academy. And I am located here in Superior, Arizona. And I am grateful for this opportunity to be able to share the work that I get to do. And I'm also very grateful that I get to service the community that I do.
Thank you. And last but not least, Monica.
Thank you, Serena. So hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monica Brinkerhoff. I work here at United Way of Tucson and Southern Arizona. And my title is Associate Vice President for Early Childhood Education. So in my role here, I oversee all of our early childhood programs and initiatives. We have many, and specifically an initiative around connecting children to nature with a focus on children's equitable access to nature. So the path, just kind of briefly, my background was I started out as a preschool teacher. I spent some time as a director at a child care center. I've worked in school districts and nonprofits and the Head Start programs, and I'm super passionate about community-driven solutions, and that is kind of rests in a foundation of my educational philosophy that children should drive curriculum and everything we do should be child-centered. So today I'm feeling super grateful for the people in our community here in Tucson, and kind of as Shay was saying, the relationships. There are just so many people here that are so committed to making Tucson a better place and working together and collaborating. And I'm just really grateful to live in such a engaged and connected community.
Thank you all for being here. I'm just really grateful to share my moment of gratitude for each of our panelists and their willingness to generously share their wisdom and insights. And I'm always really grateful to our audiences that join us at these webinars. And I'm not just saying that to prompt you all to engage in the chat, but I really think that we have a wonderful audience each time we have these conversations. So please know that we are grateful for that. And if you would like to share what you're feeling gratitude for today in the chat as a way to connect, please feel free to do so. I'm going to go ahead and have our panelists answer their first question so we can get to know them and their expertise better. But I'll have each of you share what element of community design, or maybe it's more than one, you think about most when you are considering how to make communities more equitable and resilient. And Shay, maybe I'll start with you again.
All right. Thank you all. Yeah, so I think, for me, I think a lot when on any project I'm working on, whether it's large or small, really about the elements and our relationship to, the basics, the sun, the wind, earth, water. And really we have principles, there's passive strategies for all of those things that can be incorporated into any design at any scale. And I think, the way modern buildings developed with air conditioning, it really kind of sealed us off from outdoors and sealed us off from that connection. But when you look at traditional vernacular architecture and really regional forms of architecture, they're all place-based, and they're all sourcing local materials, and they're all usually adapting to the climate in some way that's responsive to those conditions. And so I grew up here in the Sonoran Desert in the Southwest with a long tradition of builders in my family. And my grandfather was the one who first started teaching me about, just how a building should be oriented in relationship to the sun. Long direction goes east-west, no windows on the east or west. And then there's preferences, like some people really like Eastern light, but as I've learned, more in architecture, you can get more creative with those basic principles. But as well as passive ventilation, he was always adjusting the openings of doors and windows to allow the cross breeze to go through. And there's just a lot of basic principles that I grew up with because everyone in my family was poor basically. And those passive strategies go a long way without having to invest a ton of money in infrastructure or expensive sustainable technologies like solar panels. And really that should be our first layer of design when thinking about any project. And as well as rainwater harvesting. My grandfather would be out there with his wheelbarrow catching water, and he had the system where he would run the condensate from the swamp cooling out to the grass, and just so resourceful with every possible element here in Arizona, where we're also aware of the scarcity that exists. So that's one thing I think about a lot.
Thanks for sharing that, Shay. Maggie, how about you? What element or elements of community design do you think about most?
Yeah, thanks, Serena. So early in my career, I thought more about, what Shay was talking about, some of that more tactical project planning elements on the ground. And as my career has sort of shifted more into the policy realm, today I think more about, exploring what it is we mean by community design in the first place. Is it the physical design of the community? Or now I think more about who's designing it, who has influenced that design. Traditionally design is done by trained designers, urban designers, architects, planners, experts in their field. But who are they designing these spaces for? And can we as designers and planners really be experts in every single place that we work in? Certainly not. It's the people that live in those communities and work in those communities and experience those communities on a very personal, intimate level every day that is really the expert in understanding the needs of that particular place. Where is shade needed the most in a particular neighborhood? As a planner, I'm not going to know the answer to that. I may come with technical expertise in, evaluating where shade is needed, what types of trees may be most appropriate, how to get it done, financing and all of that. But where those needs are, it's really based in that community. And what I've learned over my career as a planner is, I really feel like my role is to use our expertise to facilitate in service of the communities that we're working to improve. So we bring our expertise to frame certain parameters, but then create a context really for those with the least amount of power, those who are most affected by the design of their communities, put them at the center of that decision-making process. And I shared a couple of photos with Serena before this call of desire paths. And this is just something to illustrate my point. And this is a sort of urban planning jargon, transportation planning jargon, but a desire path, I'm sure you've all seen this in your own communities, but it's basically an unplanned trail created by foot traffic typically, and it represents, the more direct route from point A to point B between places. They're convenient shortcuts where planned routes are either non-existent or they're more meandering. And in Finland, apparently it's commonplace for planners to sort of wait for the snow to fall and then see where people track to help them make a determination as to where they should put more formalized paths. And it's really acting as that, like a template. So this just really demonstrates, people know what they need and what they want in their communities. And it's our role as the professional planners and designers to listen and help, create that reality. So that's what I really think about. And I'll add too that I think, the concept of centering community in that decision-making process and in that design process, planners and policymakers are recognizing this. They're really starting to realize this. You can see it in how urban planners are trying to address equity in all facets of planning. And you can see it in the criteria that the federal government is establishing for a lot of the infrastructure funding that's out there now through Bill and IRA. And we're looking in our office a lot at EPA funding through Community Change Grant and others, where they're really laying out the expectations of community-driven and user-driven design.
Thank you, Maggie. Miracle, what do you think about when you think about community design?
I definitely have to agree with both Shay and Maggie. I feel like those are both 2 points that I do consider. I think working for and like keeping a community center alive, community, like exactly what Maggie said, like community really drives our initiatives. And like we do a lot of listening sessions and talking one-on-one with our community. Something that my mentor taught me early on, it's not what we do for the community or to the community, it's what we do with the community. And really having the people that live in this area that have been here for generations, that know the ins and outs, to be able to be a part of that planning, and then giving the community what they are actually in need of, and just guessing and making assumptions on what they might need. I haven't lived here my whole life in Superior, Arizona. This is going to be my third year living here. So I really try to connect with my surroundings and with the community members, and really just trying to listen in on what we could do as an organization to better help them. So I think community is like a huge factor in when I decide about community design. I think also being a student, like I love architecture, and like something that I like to do for fun is I'm a bit of a dreamer. I like to envision things that could happen. Like I'll go around and look at an empty plot of land and sketch up a design on what it could be and how it could be a food forest for the neighborhood, how it could be turned into a park. So I really like this, the imagination of what could be when you have the group of people, the community behind you to make something happen. Because I can't do it all by myself. The community is like ultimately the thing that I involve for community design.
Thanks, Miracle. I think we'll be all looking forward to hearing more about what you've been dreaming up, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to get to that. And of course, last but not least, again, but you won't always be last in this conversation, Monica, please share what you think about with community design.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Serena. And Miracle, I love that you said that quote about not doing to or for community, but doing with community, because that actually encapsulates like my approach to educating young children and working with adults. And so really doing things in collaboration. My one word answer is pretty similar to along the lines of thinking outside of the built environment when we think of design, and really thinking to my one word would be children. And I think I sent a few slides to Serena to just go over a few points, but that's one of our philosophies here at United Way is we're centered around bringing people together to make things better for our community. One of the things that we know here and is sort of is well known is that children are the least responsible for climate change, and they're set up to face the biggest impacts of climate change. And the good news is that they're also key to mitigating climate change. So we were really excited to be able to partner as one of the Nature Everywhere communities. So that's a collaboration between the Children and Nature Network, the National League of Cities, and Kaboom. And as part of this network, we co-lead the Pima County Connecting Children to Nature initiative, together with the Pima County Parks and Recreation and Prescott College Center for Nature and Place, and really working toward children's equitable access to nature. We know that there are many benefits to nature for young children, promote school readiness, meaning enhanced ability to play and cognition, better social emotional skills like self-regulation and getting along with others. And kind of you can see in some of these pictures how these experiences might be created by being able to be outdoors and in nature, better physical wellness and as well as and mental health supports, and then connection to nature and community. So there's so many benefits for children. And we know that creating positive spaces and allowing children time in nature also provides them with a chance to love nature and then become future stewards of the environment and the earth. And then similarly, we know that investing in the early years has multiple downstream positive impacts, but unfortunately the early childhood workforce is undercompensated. Early childhood facilities are sometimes poorly constructed or maintained because we have so little in operating budgets. And there's also inequities in access to high quality early childhood education. So we really need to focus our efforts on bringing more experiences to young children and to the adults that are caring for them, and really trying to address the inequities that exist. So that's a little bit about what we're about. And I was just speaking with a coworker today about the importance of really doing this work together with the community and having it be driven by our partners and really doing this in collaboration with all the great people here in Tucson.
Thanks, Monica. And I really appreciate that you started to address some of the inequities that we see in community design, because that is, of course, an important part of this conversation. So I'll have you start, Miracle, because I think that it's interesting to think about what the inequities look like in a more rural community. But what are some of the elements of the built environment that present the biggest obstacles for residents to be healthy and happy in your community?
In Superior, Arizona, we are like a low income town. So I think that already is like a huge challenge for the people here and like getting opportunities. I think also we're located in the desert, which means that we are a little bit like underdeveloped away from the big city and stuff. So we are a bit of a food desert. So there's not a lot of opportunity for local healthy foods for people. And if they are, they're traveling far away to go and get those resources. Same thing with like healthcare. We're a little bit of a healthcare desert as well. We have a clinic and it's not like 24 hours or anything. The closest hospital is either in AJ or in Globe. So you are going to have to travel. And then same thing with like mental health. We don't really have a mental health facility here. You'll have to outsource that. So I think honestly, something that Regenerating Sonora is very passionate about doing is having things more local to the Copper Corridor and specifically Superior, making sure that we have these resources in-house and not having to outsource it from far away. We have this initiative that we're wanting to start, like people are on dialysis, and so the elderly have to drive like an hour away to go to a doctor. How can we get transportation for these elderly people to their doctor's offices? And I feel like childcare, well, going back to Monica's point as well, lack of opportunities for the youth here in our town because we are a low income community. Our schools don't get as much money, and there's quite a bit of struggles, but I'm really happy that I get to work with Regenerating Sonora because a lot of our initiatives go to trying to fight these or trying to have some kind of answer to make it better to live here in our town.
Thanks, Miracle. We'll be talking a lot more about the work that Regenerating Sonora is doing. I put the link to their website in the chat, and I really encourage everyone to check out what they're doing because I get so inspired every time I have a chance to chat with them and hear about the amazing things that are happening in Superior. I will turn it over to Maggie to talk about some of the elements of the built environment that present the biggest obstacles for residents to be healthy and happy along the Rio Reimagined project.
Yeah, thanks. So Rio Reimagined, as I mentioned, is, a planning initiative that's been in the works for a number of years. There's been decades of planning in this river corridor. It's 55 miles. Through the heart of the urban metro area. The study area looks 1 to 2 miles above the riverbanks, and this encompasses 6 cities, 2 tribal nations, unincorporated areas of Maricopa County, and countless residents. The land ownership and use types across the corridor is extremely varied. If you're familiar with the Phoenix metro area in the east, we have the more robust infrastructure of Tempe Town Lake, which is right by the ASU campus, and a lot of robust sort of infrastructure and economic development that's happened over the years. And then as you move west, out all the way towards Buckeye, the conditions along the river corridor are much more dispersed. Less urban, less dense, more agricultural uses, more natural ecosystem conditions along the corridor itself. There are pockets of water. There's a lot of active mining that's happening within the river. And so I'm just painting this picture because, as you can imagine, the communities 1 to 2 miles above the banks are extremely different across this 55-mile stretch. And so the needs and the biggest obstacles to health and happiness and thermal comfort is going to be very varied. And, there's been a lot of planning across the corridor over the last several decades, but Rio Reimagined as an initiative, we have not yet, there's no overarching regional scale plan for this river corridor. With all of those different jurisdictions at play here, there are various degrees of planning in those different jurisdictions. And so we're about to embark, and I'll talk more about this, I'm sure, in the webinar, but we're about to embark on a planning process to develop that sort of overarching regional scale plan. And part of that is participatory visioning. What do all of these communities across this corridor want and need and envision for the future? And so part of that is, answering this question of what are those biggest obstacles to health and happiness, and how can the river corridor, facilitate making those changes? So I think the short answer is I don't know yet. I'm looking forward to exploring that, in the next couple of years as we engage in this planning process. But just from my experience as an urban planner, I think that the answer will be the things that people have to deal with on a daily basis that either help or hinder what they need to do. And so I think one of the more obvious would be the freedom of movement and thermal comfort and safety. So I know there's a lot of research out there on public transportation and, bus stops. And I was just reading an article yesterday from a study done by Transportation Alternatives, and I think NASA. They have an EJ and an environmental justice team, and this was a report looking at New York City, but it's relevant because they were analyzing summer temperatures at New York City bus stops, and they found, maybe unsurprisingly, that the hottest bus stops were almost 15 degrees hotter than the coolest bus stops, and they were more likely to be located in low-income and non-white communities. And those also happen to be the communities with the most bus riders. And so, the cooler bus stops were more likely to have shelter, be near street trees, have more green space, be near a body of water. And so a study like that really highlights ways that we can prioritize bus stops for these types of improvements. And that, that speaks to the equity piece as well.
Thanks, Maggie. That is really astounding, a 15-degree difference. I think we all at the tail end of summer in Arizona can understand the difference that 15 degrees can make. Monica, I will go ahead and ask you the same question. What are some of the challenges or obstacles in the built environment that you see in your community?
Well, I think first what I'll say is that we often talk about early care and education and childcare as infrastructure. So just as people need roads to go to work and utilities to go to work, parents need childcare so that they can go to work. So from an early childhood perspective, childcare deserts is a concept that sort of quantifies where is the availability of childcare for parents. And Maggie, to your point around transportation, what we'd want to see are high quality early care and education childcare facilities where they're close to where parents could walk to drop off their children, or it's nearby their work. We would also, I kind of am talking about what we would love to see is also like parks within walking distance and along safe walking paths and that walkability to those green spaces. So some of the biggest obstacles, I think, for realizing those goals are things like, again, transportation, just access to green spaces, the availability of high quality early learning environments. And then, of course, in our desert context, things like shade and heat exposure. And then also just, parks and public spaces that are safe and welcoming for children, and specifically young children, because the built environment in a park for, a birth to 5-year-old needs some specific special elements, and those are not always present in parks and public spaces. So we would love to see more natural elements, logs and rocks and boulders and things that really inspire engagement between children and their environment.
Thank you, Monica. And Shay, what challenges and obstacles do you see in your community with the built environment?
Yeah, so there's honestly, I think I agree with a lot of what everyone's saying. I see more of the challenges outside the built environment than I do with buildings themselves necessarily, but definitely the lack of trees, right? I think there's a really interesting maps out there that show the inequity, right, in shade trees. And in Arizona, shade is so critical. It's a 10 to 15 degree cooling difference instantly. And as well as, in inner cities where we have the urban heat dome, trees really help combat those negative effects we have of so much asphalt and so much concrete. And and in the when you look at construction budgets, landscape is one of the least expensive interventions we can make. So I think for especially communities of color, just the lack of green infrastructure, is huge. I think that's probably the biggest challenge I see for the built environment. And it's been really exciting to be in Tucson, where we have a mayor who's really in support of planting trees and has been trying to, and we have a bunch of awesome nonprofit partners who all are dedicated to this work. And I think it's great, and definitely would love to see more of it. And I'm excited for the continued investments I see in Tucson, at least around, just really innovative practices with public green infrastructure, and getting that more and more a part of our, basically, the fabric of our city and our built environment. So it's exciting.
Thanks, Shay. It sounds like there will be some great lessons coming out of Tucson that hopefully we can replicate across the state and have more access to trees and shade. I wanted to shift to some of the specific threats that we have here in Arizona. And by that, I mean extreme heat and wildfire. And I would love to hear from each of you about how you think we can design to really combat those specific threats of heat and wildfires. And Miracle, I saw that you've already unmuted, so I'm going to let you answer first.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like this is right on topic for what we're doing here in Superior, Arizona. So of course, excessive heat warnings, natural disasters like wildfires are a huge concern over here in rural Arizona. One of the ways that we're able to combat that is creating a resiliency hub. So the community center that I work at, called Leo's Community Development Center, functions as something that Monica had brought up at a previous question, is like a safe place. I'm really happy that our community center is a safe place for homeless people to get free food, to get free water, to get free clothes. We also have opportunities for the youth to be able to come in and have a safe place to play. We have opportunities for the mentally ill to come in, make a doctor's appointment, or get the help that they need from our resource desk. And going back to the resiliency hub part of this, we are also a safe place during these natural disasters. A resiliency hub, we open up our center as a cooling center, so we have the AC on, we have popsicles for family, and we also have, sorry, one second, I just need to plug in my phone before it dies. But back to my point of, we're able to open up our cooling center for our families with popsicles, with water, and then also have a place for low-income families that don't have the opportunity to have AC in their own homes, come to a place where they can sit on a couch, use the Wi-Fi, and be able to comfortably survive for these long, hot hours during the summer, as well as being able to be a resiliency hub that also includes that we can have facilities like a community kitchen, where we can start putting people in their own homes with this knowledge, like we do workshop Wednesdays. They can come to our community center and get food, or bring in food and package it for long shelf storage. So being able to put the power back into people's hands on what they can do during natural disasters and being prepared for it. Another thing that we had started is called the Fire Corps with the Superior Fire Department. This is a community volunteer ran program underneath the fire department, where community members can learn to do certain things regarding fire season, like working out in the desert to get brush out of the way so there's less risk of fire, or doing house-to-house assessments, giving away free fire extinguishers. We do have like really old buildings, so sometimes they will catch on fire. So having these things available for the community, less risk. So we have really fun, exciting initiatives that we're able to implement for our community to keep them safe in their own homes and prepared for the worst.
Thanks, Miracle. I love what you said about putting the power back into people's hands. And I think the initiatives that you're undertaking are just really cool. pun not intended. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add about facing extreme heat and wildfire, or if we want to move on.
I
Okay.
can just
Go ahead,
add,
please.
yeah, I'll just add, I mean, it's not kind of a non sequitur, I guess, but just thinking about the Rio Reimagined corridor in the West Valley in particular, there's invasive species, invasive plant species are a really big problem within the river corridor itself, within the riverbed. And there are a lot of people working on this challenge, but one of the many challenges that's posed by this is increased wildfire risk. And the salt cedar tamarisk in particular burns hotter than some other plant material. And so, you know, we're thinking about that area and also the, you know, transmission lines that are critical infrastructure, you know, that runs through that area. And so in thinking, you know, statewide and in general about how do we deal with the extreme heat threat and wildfire threat, I think one of the most important design considerations overall is related to ensuring grid reliability. And I think that Arizona has one of the most reliable grids in the nation, which is great. But as we start to shift, you know, toward more renewable energy sources and balancing that with reliability, it's going to be a challenge. So we need to think about simultaneously reducing demand, working on distributed generation like microgrids and some of what Miracle was talking about, and then protecting our critical infrastructure from the wildfire threats.
Thanks, Maggie. And Shay, it sounded like you might have something to add.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, you know, when it comes to extreme heat, again, I think that the benefit of the green infrastructure, right, and the literally creating microclimates around your home is huge, you know. That, and I agree with everything everyone else has said, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I'd like to shift a little bit and have an opportunity to talk about the Children's Equity Nature Index that the United Way of Tucson and Southern Arizona has developed with the City of Tucson's Equity Office. And Monica, could you tell us a little bit more about this index? And I'll drop a link in the chat and how you all are using this index.
Sure. And I like to tell the story about how it came about also. So as part of this Nature Everywhere network, we receive as a community technical assistance and support. And they said one of the things that communities do is create a nature equity map. And we got really excited because we wanted to be able to show with data what we know to exist. And, you know, we know the inequities are out there, and we are excited to have a visualization that could really tell the story of that to policymakers and decision makers. So as we started on the journey, we knew that the City of Tucson's Office of Equity had what's called a vulnerability index. And so we reached out to them. Happened that they had an intern in their program that could, for her master's degree project, was able to help us develop this map. And it also happened that she was really passionate about children's access to nature. So it was this wonderful, beautiful serendipity that came to be. And her name was Ellie Hammond, and she's on our steering committee. And I just want to put a shout out to her because she worked so hard on this map and collected a lot of feedback from everyone. And we're super excited. So folks should certainly check it out. But it helps us visualize the connection between where young children are located, where green spaces are, and then equity in Pima County. And, you know, there's really, you can see the corridor of where the inequities exist. It's kind of the purple part of the map where you can see it's low access. And our intention is that this map will be used to make decisions about where we're going to infuse resources. So one of our partners in the initiative is, I mentioned earlier, Pima County Parks and Recreation, and then also City of Tucson Parks and Recreation. So now we all have this map at our fingertips. And so the hope going forward is that school districts and nonprofit organizations and city planners will be able to use this map to include and inform their decisions going forward. So we're super excited about it.
Thanks, Monica. We'll be sure to share a link to the Children's Equity Nature Index in our follow-up notes that everyone will be receiving as well. I'm going to have Maggie talk a little bit more about the Rio planning process in just 1 second, but I just wanted to acknowledge that I see Shannon's question in the Q&A, and we will get to that next about water availability, and that might be a topic that comes up when Maggie's talking about Rio. But I think that the Rio Reimagined process is a really cool example, since they're just starting this planning process as we start to think about resilient and equitable communities and how you might embark on that process from the beginning. So Maggie, please share whatever is top of mind to you when you're thinking about this process, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Serena. And I didn't see the question in the chat, so hopefully I answer it, but if not, happy to circle back. So for those of you that are not familiar, and I've kind of tried to pepper this throughout some of my other comments, but the Rio Reimagined initiative is based on a long planning history here in the Metro Phoenix area, and really started in the late 60s with an ASU architecture class that developed the first master plan for a 40-mile stretch of the Salt and Gila River. Actually, that master plan was just the Salt River piece between Mesa and the city of Phoenix. And in the decades that followed, there's been a lot of, I'm fast forwarding many decades, but lots of planning and projects that have happened within the corridor across these 6 different cities and 2 tribal nations and the county and Salt River Project. And in 2018, the late Senator McCain, who was one of the Rio Reimagined champions, as well as Congressman Ed Pastor before him, but Senator McCain convened the elected leaders of these communities, of the 6 cities, the 2 tribes, the county and Salt River Project, to sign this non-binding statement of intent where they all agreed to work together to realize a regional scale vision for the river corridor, because until that point, it had been more this sort of dispersed activity. And the idea was, if we start to look at this river corridor from a more regional scale, you know, there's going to be a lot of power in that. This is an asset that the Valley has sort of turned its back on, if you will, for a long time. And it used to be this incredible source of life and power for the community that came before. So, so these communities all signed this non-binding statement of intent, and in so doing, identified Arizona State University to be the facilitator and convener for this initiative, which is why Rio Reimagined sits within our office at the University City Exchange today. And over the last 6 years, we have done a lot of work out of our office to build sort of a brand identity for the Rio Reimagined, and to build consensus and a diverse partnership beyond just those public sector partners that signed that statement of intent in 2018, to include nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations, folks living and working within the corridor, industry, private sector, foundations. And we've built a lot of connection to our federal delegation. And all of this is to say that we have had a lot of momentum, but we have not embarked yet on this planning process to say, okay, what does all of this mean? What does all of this look like at the end of the day? You know, what are we working towards? What is our North Star, if you will, for the Rio corridor? So we are now at a point where we're ready. And by we, I mean the partners, the partnership, all of these different players that I've described are ready to work together to identify what that overarching vision is, and acknowledging that it will be built upon a foundation of plans and projects across that 55 miles. You know, we're not reinventing the wheel. And so, you know, we're at the very beginning now of that process. And a lot of people are surprised to hear that there's no overarching plan yet for the river corridor. And so a lot of our work is sort of communicating that that's where we are, and that, yes, it's been talked about a lot, but because we're at the beginning, this is a fantastic opportunity for everyone to be a part of the process. And so we know the value that a regional scale vision plan will have for the corridor in terms of helping the region be more competitive, for federal funding, for leveraging the momentum that we've built over 6 years to align diverse priorities across the 55 miles. And so because of the diversity of the partnership and all the stakeholders across the corridor, you know, there's an opportunity here for us to be really intentional about how we structure this planning process. So what we're starting with here, we've had the elected leaders from the Rio communities support the concept of engaging in this planning process. And rather than ASU, you know, writing a request for proposals to secure a consultant to lead, you know, development of a plan, what we're saying is because of everything we know about the communities across the corridor, because of everything we know about, you know, our own value system in wanting to do better as a community in centering the community in the decision-making process, how can we frame this in a different way? And so the first thing that we're doing is we're writing an RFP, but it's for a consultant to lead us as a partnership through an intentional scoping process, to scope what a plan would look like. Who needs to be engaged? What does a community engagement strategy across 55 miles even look like? How do we do that well? How do we do that in a meaningful way? What types of plan elements are we even talking about when we talk about a regional scale vision? Who makes that decision, right? So these are really important questions that in a lot of planning processes are answered behind closed doors, you know, and so we see this as an opportunity to open up the door to this conversation. And some of the other priorities, you know, that we're trying to pull into this process is ensuring that the scoping process itself is led by a committee composed of equitable representation of the Rio Reimagined partners and stakeholders, ensuring that the design of a planning process and of a community engagement strategy is created by those that know what that means, and then the experts in those local communities, accounting for the local context. And we're trying to ensure that this also reflects a community engagement process that encompasses more of a holistic approach to community-led decision-making. And another big piece of this that we may discuss later in this conversation is how do we incorporate Indigenous knowledge into the Rio Reimagined planning process and scope of work? What does that look like? What does that entail? How do we even start that conversation?
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Maggie. I hope everyone will check out the Rio Reimagined website and follow along with this this process, because I think it's a really fascinating example, especially at the scale that you all are undertaking. I am wanting to shift to the audience question that we got from Shannon. And Shannon, thank you so much for your thoughtful question. She asked, how does water availability play in these urban design initiatives? And Shay, I'd love to have you go ahead and answer about what your thoughts on water availability.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about what's happening in Tucson. You know, we were really lucky here to have Brad Lancaster, who really kind of wrote the book here, literally, on water harvesting. And his book is so inspirational. When I first read it, I read it from cover to cover. And I was like, yes, there's a plan. We can do this. And his approaches are really DIY and really were guerrilla tactics, actually, urban guerrilla tactics, where he would go in and curb cut the curves. You know, we have this space called the right of way, which is like from your property line to the street, which usually has a sidewalk and some little space for planting, which is usually just dirt and very rarely actually has plants in it. And so he would cut the curb and allow the kind of just gravity, natural fed street water to then, you know, passive gray water to fill these basins. And so a lot of the greenest infrastructure that's going around in Tucson is passively fed just by runoff from the street. So that's what's so exciting is, and when you look at, again, traditional and ancient knowledge, I think what's happening in in Latin America right now with the uncovering, with the LIDAR, with all the mine communities that are being uncovered, we see entire communities planned off of rainwater harvesting, where every roof surface and street was designed to capture water, and those communities were located in the jungle. They were entirely reliant on rainwater and groundwater, and Tucson and so many other desert communities are in the same position. And we know just through effective design and urban infrastructure at this scale, wow, I'm excited for the future. Just what little Tucson has started here. I really do feel there's hope, and with proper management, we could really be investing and making these investments in our green infrastructure in our future. For relatively low cost is the other thing again.
Yeah, and I don't know, I just wanted to pop this in here, is that Shay, if we think about engaging young children and starting to teach these practices in early childhood where kids start to learn about this, then those are practices they can carry into adulthood.
Absolutely.
Love that idea. Miracle, did you have something you wanted to add about water availability?
Yeah. So a little bit of a morbid start, but eventually we'll get to something really good that we're doing. So I think we're aware that around the world, other countries, some of them are like starting to go to war over these resources, especially water resources. And here in Superior, one of my dreams and one of Regenerating Sonora's dreams is to make sure that our town is self-sufficient and resilient as well. And so I'm like really excited about what we have going on, because there is this division between, I think also going back to like a little bit, the town doesn't own their water, Arizona Water Company does. And that goes for our entire town. So there's not a lot of opportunity for the community to have power in their water resources, because it doesn't belong to them. It doesn't belong to the town. It belongs to the state. And something that Leo's Community Development Center does with our workshop Wednesdays is we try to do a self-sufficiency workshop during those Wednesday workshops, so that we can educate the community about where their water is coming from, what's in their water, and talking about water cycles and so forth in our area, and starting to educate people to make these decisions. I also work as a promotora for the University of Arizona, and I am in the environmental science department. And something that the STEAM in Action program that got started for rural Arizona by the Scientific Educational Partnership Award. They were granted to give money to create a community advisory board and a youth advisory board to pay both community members and youth to learn about these type of issues in our environment, and then being able to give them the resources to be able to talk to government officials, to talk to people of power for system change. And I'm just like so thrilled that not only do we get to give the community and the youth this opportunity, but also to be able to pay them for their efforts and their time to make our town and our copper corridor a better place to live.
Thanks, Miracle. I am going to point out that we are at almost an hour into this conversation that we're having today, and we intentionally scheduled this webinar to be 75 minutes because we knew that this topic deserved that longer length of time, as well as these great panelists have just a ton of insight. So I hope you'll stick around for the next 15 minutes. If you have to head out, we understand, and hope that you'll watch the recording, because I know that there are still some great things that we haven't even covered yet. but I wanted to ask this question that had come up when we all met to practice for this webinar. And David Longoria from LISC Phoenix had such an insightful question about how each of these panelists envision these different areas of expertise, policy, design, advocacy, and education coming together to create a comprehensive strategy for resilient community building. So I'll ask each of our expert panelists to share their thoughts and if they think a comprehensive strategy is even possible or necessary. So whoever unmutes first, you get the honors of answering the question. No pressure.
All right.
Thanks,
I'll go.
Shay.
I think last time I was first too, but I think for me, when I listened to everybody and we had such a great conversation for me, it was the connection to nature and outdoors really was, I think, the one thread that I could find. I think that yes, in general, there's some kind of synergy or some sort of strategy needed to bring the groups together. But in general, I think that really centering everything around our connection to the outdoors, our relationship to nature, and developing and cultivating an ethic of stewardship should and is central to everyone's work. And so, yeah, those were just my quick thoughts.
Yeah, and I can chime in next because you kind of inspired me. I think that, my response to this question is that yes, a comprehensive strategy is absolutely possible. And I think what it takes is working cross-sector and cross-department and cross-organizations and really focusing first on, what we want to see and focusing on, I think when you have multiple perspectives, it can kind of get easy and to get lost in what's different and how we see it differently. But if we can kind of maintain our focus on what we want to see in the future and what our shared vision is, I think that can be the secret special sauce. So I think that, even how we came together on this webinar today, all with very different perspectives and able to kind of weave this tapestry of what it could look like and what a good design could look like for, connection to nature and the outdoors. So that's what I would have to say. Just a lot of collaboration and breaking down the silos.
To second on Monica's comment, I do think it's possible. I'm definitely optimistic and I'm a dreamer. So I like to dream big and think that a lot of things are possible if we have the right people. And I think that's honestly what it comes down to is the collaboration and connection to everybody. A diagram that we use a lot to describe this to other people is the nested circles diagram. So you have Superior, then you have the Copper Corridor, you have Arizona, and then you have the world, and starting at home and then starting to ripple out and make these bigger, grander things. Really big impacts can come from really small gestures that come from love. And I think that the collaboration component is just so important. And I'll leave my answer to that.
I love these answers, and I agree that certainly a comprehensive strategy is necessary, and I do think it's possible. And I think to Monica's point, at the core of it is looking and identifying our higher purpose, because while we come from different perspectives, different silos, it's hard sometimes to figure out how to collaborate. Yes, that's a great idea to collaborate, but what does that really mean in practice? What does it mean that we have to compromise on? What can we agree on? If we identify what our higher purpose is, a lot of those details become less important. And in addition to that higher purpose, I also think that it's really based on individual relationships. So much of collaboration, how we work together cross-sectorally is based on individual relationships. And so the more opportunities we have for these cross interdisciplinary conversations to build those interpersonal relationships, the more possible this will become. This convening of us here today seemed so random at first. And then, as you start to realize, okay, we all believe in a certain ideal at the end of the day, and how, our different perspectives really support each other's goals, and how can we then move that into practice. And the other thing I just wanted to say is, often there's these different groups, the advocacy groups and the political jurisdictions, those relationships are often mired in historical traumas, distrust. And the only way to really rebuild that and to move forward is to focus on those individual relationships and creating spaces to heal. And so I think, selfishly, as an urban planner and in the work that I do with Reimagined, I think that vision planning is a place where that work can really happen. And so I'm excited for that.
Thank you all for sharing those really thoughtful answers. I wanted to make sure that we address housing and talk about that, because in addition to facing a climate crisis, we're also facing a housing crisis in Arizona. And Shay, I know you've done a lot of work in the affordable housing arena, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on what types of housing you think can address both of these crises.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yes, I started to work for myself because I had worked mostly on larger commercial affordable housing projects, which are great, primarily projects associated with the LIHTC program and that sort of thing. But that really only builds you kind of what we're already typically used to building, some form of conventional construction, stick frame, stucco, that sort of thing. And I really wanted space and time to start exploring other building materials, other building methods and ideas. And I was also really interested in the smaller scale, because I just was seeing how, when you walk around any historic neighborhood, we have a much more diverse housing stock and housing typology. You have duplexes, triplexes, you have little cute casita courtyards, casita clusters. There's all these really cool, innovative ways that people have kind of pinched on square footage, built as small as they could, and just kind of filled in the pockets within these neighborhoods. And so I was really excited to be a part of a few different initiatives in Tucson around getting our ADU code amendment passed, and really focusing on small scale urban infill is primarily what I do now at the residential scale. Through this kind of small scale architecture, one, we're addressing affordability because we can, we're squeezing on square footage, right? So smaller buildings are going to be faster, quicker, easier to build. But also it's a time and space to experiment with other building technologies where you're not taking such a huge risk as like a $13 million project. It's a smaller scale where we can really start to test, other building technologies. Like I got to do a light straw clay build, which is really cool, which is a type of thermal resistant natural build. I've been experimenting with compressed earth block. It's just, I think it's an exciting time and sphere to really begin to get back to natural building practices and more vernacular forms of architecture that are more regionally adapted to our climate. So that's kind of what I've been working on in that sphere.
Thanks, Shay. I am going to start to wrap us up because I know each of you have some other thoughts and comments that you would love to wrap us up with today. And I am so grateful to our entire audience for your really thoughtful comments, what you've shared in the discussion. If we did not get to your question, I'm really sorry. 75 minutes just flew right by. I really wanted to thank Catherine in particular for her really thoughtful comments in the chat. And thank you all for sharing your links and being part of this conversation today. I'm going to give each of our panelists a couple of minutes to share any remaining thoughts or things that they'd like to have the audience walk away with today, any calls to action you might have. But before I turn it over to each of our panelists to end things today, I wanted to say thank you to our sponsor, Arcos Health, for sponsoring the Arizona Partnership for Healthy Communities webinar series this year. I wanted to thank LISC Phoenix for their management of the Partnership for Healthy Communities. And most importantly, I wanted to thank our audience and our panelists for being here and having another really insightful, wonderful conversation. We can have these conversations because people like Monica, Miracle, Shay, and Maggie are willing to share their time and be so excited to share their wisdom with everyone. So thank you all. And I am going to give each of our panelists a minute or so to share anything else that they might want to have our audience walk away with. I'll have Monica start, then Miracle, Shay, and Maggie, you'll wrap us up. Go ahead, Monica.
Yeah, I guess if I could just, have one key point or key takeaway is just that remembering that childcare and early learning is a part of our community's infrastructure. And so I would just, encourage everyone and when you're part of planning processes or conversations to just remember, how does this affect young children and their families? And I think if we can remember to ask that question, young children will not be an afterthought, but they'll be included in different plans and initiatives and strategies. So that would be my call to action or request for the audience.
Thank you, Monica. Miracle, final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm so honored that I was able to meet with the panelists and learn from you guys. I definitely feel like I'm walking away with a lot of knowledge, a lot of new insights. And as far as what I have going on, I feel like 75 minutes is it went by really, really fast. And I don't think any of us really got to capture what we're doing because there's just so much and good people do good things. And I think if anybody is interested in learning more, a good place is Regenerating Sonora's Facebook page. And for visualizations, Regenerating Sonora on YouTube. I have a Regen News, kind of like a little news show. So every 2 weeks, I'll do a recap of the things that the nonprofit is doing within the community. And it's a really good place to check out the things that we're doing.
Great. We'll be sure to share a link to Regenerating Sonora and any of the links that have been shared during this conversation so audience members can follow up. Shay, any final thoughts?
Yes, I just wanted to give a quick plug for a project I'm working on. It's the Southwest Recce project. It's a resiliency code for the Southwest that's being developed right now. We'll be looking for additional partners and voices and community participation in that. So I'm really excited to be a part of that. And, on that, as part of that group, we're also, part of our strategy is looking at ways we can really have a regionally focused green building code that's really, again, similar to everything I was talking about, based in our climate, in our region, and the local materials and traditional wisdom and knowledge. So I'm really hoping to help, along with others, bring that perspective through and make sure we have something that is really unique and adaptable to the Southwest. So yeah, if you're interested in that, that would be great. Please reach out.
Thanks, Shay. Maggie, final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. So it just occurred to me that I'm using 2 New York City stories and examples here. So yes, I am a New Yorker, in case anyone was wondering. Can't help myself, but I was just going to share here at the end that just as important as centering community in the design process is having public sector champions that support policies and regulations for climate resilient and equitable communities. And I was going to share a very quick story that I worked for New York City Department of City Planning right after Hurricane Sandy decimated so much of the Eastern Seaboard. And I worked on projects on Staten Island that dealt with integrating new flood design regulations for coastal communities and protecting natural areas. And it was the city and state leadership that really recognized the value of coastal and inland wetlands, open space, other natural features like steep slopes and old growth trees, not just for climate resilience and storm surge protection in that case, but also for preserving the natural character of the communities and ecosystem health in an urban environment like New York City. And this was possible even in a place where the most undevelopable land was really the only land left to develop. And because of the values and the intention of the leadership, we were able to accomplish a lot of great work. So thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. I am just so grateful to all of our panelists and our audience. And I just wanted to leave reiterating one thing that Miracle said a few minutes ago. A lot of things are possible if we have the right people. And certainly we had the right people here on our panel and in our audience. So thank you all so much for being here today. And we'll be sending out this recording and hope to hear from you all and see you on a future webinar. Take care.